Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our video. I am Starling Brighter here with Linda Berry. We are going to be talking about the cycle of Mercury and Mercury's retrograde, something that we talk about, you hear about all over online, and we're going to give you an interesting spin to it using vibrational astrology and something that's not vibrational astrology, the Sabian symbols, at the end of the video. So before we dig in, I want to say hi, Linda. How are you doing today?
Hi, Starlene. I'm doing great. And you?
I'm doing great too. It's great to do another video with you. So are you ready to show the slides?
Yes, let's go for it.
Great.
Okay, the first thing we're going to do is talk about what in the world is this whole bit about retrograde cycles. There's what we call a shadow period. You can see on the left here, start of shadow before the retrograde. This is the start of the retrograde degrees. Before the planet turns retrograde. This applies to all retrogrades, not just Mercury. Go through here. When we get over here, we're at the point where the planet appears to turn around. Now, against the background of the sky, it looks like it's going backwards. Yes, we know it doesn't, but it looks like it. Then it gets back to that starting point, and it turns around again, and it goes forward over the same area. So this particular part of the zodiac gets covered 3 times in a cycle instead of the one time that the rest of the zodiac gets covered for that particular planet. Now, this is related to its position connected with the sun. And for Mercury and Venus, the middle of the retrograde cycle is when the sun is conjunct Mercury or Venus, when Mercury or Venus is on the same side of the sun as the Earth. The planets Mars through Pluto, their retrograde period has them opposite the sun. And we're going to do another video on retrogrades where we'll talk about the retrograde pattern in some more detail. But why do planets appear retrograde? Well, we're looking at the sky from here on Earth. The energy of actually the ecliptic, the zodiac, and is flowing through the planets to the Earth. The zodiac and the constellations of stars are relatively fixed. They're like a background for the planets, which they're moving through that field. When we look at a planet from here on Earth, we see its position using the sky as this measuring point, but it's more than a measuring point. It's that energy of that particular position in the zodiac it's like coloring the planet. It's flowing through the planet. And so we experience the planet in relation to that particular degree of the zodiac. Now, when Mercury's on the same side of the sun as the Earth, it speeds across the sky faster than the Earth, and then it appears to move backwards. And this results in it appearing to move backwards. This is an illusion because Mercury in its orbit is always moving forward. But from the perspective of us here on Earth, the part of the zodiac that's flowing through Mercury moves to earlier degrees for a little while. All right, so here's a graphic illustration. This is the point. See, Mercury is moving forward around the sun here on this orange line. The Earth is moving forward around the sun on this green orbit. Now, Mercury moves a lot faster than the Earth in its orbit around the sun. So Mercury goes a long ways and the Earth goes a smaller distance. These are not accurate mathematically. This is just a general picture. All right. So here's a point where you're on Earth and you're looking at Mercury and you see this blue line is the zodiac. You see on this blue line of the zodiac at this point that the arrow's pointing to. Now, then you go, the Earth moves forward, Mercury moves forward, and now you're at this point. Notice that you've moved, the zodiac is moving to the right around. Notice that you have moved, apparently moved backwards. This is the point where the sun, Mercury, and the Earth are lined up. This is called the Sun conjunct Mercury, and this is like the beginning point of the next cycle. All right, then here's this point over here. The Earth has moved forward again, Mercury's moved forward, and now we've gotten over here to the point where Mercury's going to start looking normal, looking like it's moving forward again. Okay, so look at this again. See here, the ecliptic, this is its normal movement. Here's when Mercury turns retrograde. Here's when the sun is conjunct Mercury in the retrograde period. Notice we're moving backwards. Here's when it turns direct. So this is what we have. The normal movement of the ecliptic is shown by the blue arrows. The apparent movement of Mercury in the sky backwards is shown by the black arrows, the ones that are going across horizontally. So maybe that gives you a little bit of an idea of why it appears that planets go retrograde. Now, look at the orbits. Mercury circles the sun in 88 days, and the Earth circles the sun in 365 days. So before I go on with this, were there any thoughts you had, Starlene?
Yeah, well, the only thing that came to mind to add to this is that the word planet actually translates from the ancients into meaning wandering star. So when the ancient people were looking up in the skies, they were seeing these planets. They called them wandering stars because they didn't know they were planets. And they called them wandering stars because they move different than all the other stars. So if you can think of it in that term, it's kind of interesting. I love that little fact because it helps you kind of conceptualize what's going on with the Mercury retrograde. But you did a great job in sharing it, and those diagrams are really helpful. So thank you for that, Linda.
You're welcome. And this is a corollary to this also, is that planet doesn't just, when we're talking about looking up at the sky, when we use the word planet as a catch-all term in astrology, and we just use it to relate to the sun and the moon and all of the planets and asteroids and everything. And we know the sun and moon aren't planets.
Right.
But it's really convenient to be able to just say planets and mean all of them instead of planets and sun and moon all the time. Right. So just so you realize that when an astrologer is talking about planets, they're also including the sun and moon and not saying that they are planets, even though they're saying they are. Okay.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, now, since the Earth is moving as well as Mercury, this creates the interaction between their orbits at certain, when the Earth and Mercury are in a certain relationship to each other, like I just showed you in the pictures. This causes Mercury to appear to be moving retrograde from 3 to 4 times a year. It has a 3.8 month cycle. So most years you have Mercury go retrograde 3 times. Every once in a while, you have Mercury go retrograde 4 times. Now, Venus does the same thing. It's still an inner planet, but its cycle, because it's closer to the same speed as the sun, it takes longer for it to get into the relationship that's going to create the retrograde. And it's every 19.2 months that Venus goes retrograde. And we're going to have one later on this fall, close to winter. I didn't look up the exact date, but we are going to have one in November or December. So both Mercury and Venus conjunct the sun during their retrograde periods. And this is when a planet conjuncts the sun in its cycle around the Earth. This is like a new moon, like when the sun conjuncts the moon, that's a new moon. It's the start of a cycle. Now, for planets outside of the Earth orbit, we've got the same kind of a process, but it's a little different because the Earth is moving faster than the planet. For Mars through Pluto, the Earth moves faster than them. So this causes the retrograde period to happen kind of balanced around when the planet is opposite the sun. So in this case, because it's opposite the sun, it's rather like a full moon or a kind of a blossoming of the energy of that planet, which is interesting because this is the retrograde period where we normally think the planet's pulled inward. But when you hit the conjunction, it's like it pops out. It's like it's all of a sudden at the opposition, you see the pattern kind of full blown, the pattern that started when the planet was conjunct the sun. This may be a little confusing. We will definitely talk about this some more in other videos. Now, here's the Mercury retrograde cycle we're dealing with right now. Mercury started its pre-shadow, this time period I talked about before it goes retrograde, on September the 6th. It's going to be retrograde from September the 27th to October the 18th, and it will move out of the retrograde degrees on November the 2nd. So here you can see the whole thing, when it starts, when it goes retrograde, when it goes direct here on October 18th, and when it finishes up its cycle and moves out of the retrograde degrees on November the 2nd. Now, there's also here, I'm showing you that special point in the middle of the retrograde cycle where the sun is conjunct Mercury and you get like your new instructions. Now, we're going to talk about that conjunction and the end of the cycle in the second video. Today, we're going to talk about the process of it going retrograde. Here is the chart for Washington, D.C. for when Mercury went retrograde on yesterday, on the 6th of September.
The pre-shadow of it, yeah.
This is the pre-shadow, the period, the start. Mercury has entered the retrograde degrees for the first time. You can see it here. Mercury is at 10 of Libra 08. That is the beginning of the retrograde degrees. And we can look at this chart to get some kind of an idea of what might be going on. Now, one of the interesting things about this chart is right before the new moon. This was 4:05 in the afternoon on September 6th, and the new moon was like 8:50, give or take a minute or two. And you can see that here because, see, the moon is only 3 degrees before the sun. It's clearly going to shortly be conjuncted. And of course, when the moon and the sun are conjunct, you have the beginning of a lunar cycle. So we've got the start of the Mercury cycle and the start of a lunar cycle right close together. And there are no full energy patterns for Mercury here. But Mercury is interacting with Jupiter, which gives us a hint that this may be about seeing the big picture of things, getting an overview, expanding your mind so that you can see the whole thing. We see the Uranus with the sun moon that's going to be so distinctive at the new moon in about slightly less than 5 hours. Okay, and one more thing we see in this chart that's important to note. Well, a couple more things. But one of the really important ones is, see this brown line between Mars and Jupiter? There's an issue connected with Mars energy and a need to make adjustments in the way the Mars energy is expressed when it expands. And we're going to see this further on down the line. It's really interesting. Okay, well, we pulled the strongest vibration of the first 32 for the point when the shadow starts. And you see it here. It's a 6th vibration, which says that we are talking about sharing with others in a harmonious way. And this vibration points to the need to be unique and individualistic, to be upbeat and enthusiastic, to be tuned into natural processes, to really get involved and touch things. This points to the importance of an alignment with nature. And it also gives a forewarning of possible problems. Because if you look at the bottom, you will see a sextile between Sun Uranus and Pluto Mars. That is volatile, even in a sextile. What's really interesting here, Starlene, is that these charts show a potential for people not using their Mars energy well. And the Sabian symbols do too, which you will see in a few minutes.
Right. And even though it's in a 6 vibration, would you say that was true too? Because the 6 vibration is about free flowing connection with other people.
Right.
Would you say that even, because, you know, these planets can be very intense, obviously. I don't want to say nefarious because that's not really a vibrational astrology term for them, but they are, they can be difficult to handle if you're not handling them correctly.
Okay. Yeah.
So would you say that even though it's in this?
Absolutely. 5? Because let me explain why.
Okay.
This is a 6th vibration. And this is a sextile in the 6th vibration. So a sextile in the 6th vibration kind of almost doubles the 6th vibration energy. It makes it a 36 instead of a 6.
Okay.
36 is a strong, strong need in the community for people to relate to each other in a understanding, harmonious way. But it's not entirely about being nice to each other. It's about recognizing that people don't always get it right, but we're going to help them fix it anyway.
Right. Right.
It also really, really expects things to be relatively nice. The problem is that when you've got Mars, Uranus, Pluto, there is a compulsive need to express your own ideas in your own way, and it's going to try to work with other people, but it's such an intense individualistic point of energy that even though it's trying to work with other people, things may get messed up. You see?
Yeah. Yeah, I do understand that. And so because this is for this specific time, it would be going on, and Mercury stays in this degree, it would be going on for this energy would be going on until Mercury actually goes to retrograde, right?
Yeah, basically it's influencing that whole period.
Okay.
Because see, this degree is not just the start of the pre-shadow. This is where Mercury is when it turns direct.
Right. It comes
It
right
has,
back full circle.
right. The chart isn't the same, but because we've gone a couple 3 weeks, but Mercury's position is the same.
Right. It makes sense.
Right. We will see that chart in the second video.
Yes, in part 2.
Okay. So now, the retrograde degree, this is when Mercury or whichever planet is slowing down in appearance to the point where it actually stops and turns backwards. That's what it looks like in the sky. So the retrograde degree is the 25th degree of Libra. And Mercury enters that degree, but it doesn't get out of it, not the way one normally would. So it enters that degree at 1:21 a.m. on the 24th of September. And it's moving forward toward 26, but it's going slower and slower and slower. 3 days later, almost exactly 3 days later, it has stopped. The point where it stops is 1:10 a.m. on the 27th. And the period right before it stops, it's moving so slow, you basically can't see it's doing any movement. This is at 25 of Libra 28. Now it stops and it starts going backwards. So it was going forward toward 26 of Libra. Now it stopped and it's turned around and it's moving backwards toward the beginning of the degree 25 of Libra. It leaves that retrograde degree on the 29th of Libra at 9:17:21 p.m. Mercury normally goes through a degree when it's at full speed in less than a day.
Right.
When it turns retrograde, it spends 5 days in the same degree. It doesn't even cover the whole degree. So this makes the 25th degree of Libra a strong point of impact. So what that means is that, now this is in the natal chart, remember we're looking at the natal chart here, is that if you have Mercury, if you have some planet that's interacting with 25 of Libra, then Mercury's going to be putting energy into it, and it's going to be affected by Mercury turning retrograde. Now, it's the chart again for Washington, D.C. for 1:10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on the 27th of September. So basically, you go to sleep on the 26th if you're in the Eastern time zone, and Mercury's direct. Well, moving so slow, you almost wouldn't know. And then you get up on the 27th, and it's retrograde. Okay, so let's look at this chart for a minute. Mercury is sitting here again. Mercury at this point. Now, it's interesting that Mercury is again relating to Jupiter, but it's not relating in vibration 1 because this is, but there's kind of this hint of the importance of the big picture here. Now, Mercury is also square Pluto, which brings some intensity into it, but you're not going to see behaviors there. We have to go to one of the vibrations to get a full picture of what Mercury's doing at the time it turns retrograde. You do see the Sun, Mars with Saturn. Remember, in vibrational astrology, we need 3 planets in certain aspects with each other. So I'm just isolating the patterns, the one pattern actually in this chart that gives us a hint of things. Sun, Mars, trine, Saturn, that we're going to need to do some dirty work here. And I think that the retrogrades are going to give us some information on that. All right, the vibration where the Mercury retrograde is strongest is vibration 7. Now, a lot of it's in the midpoints, and I didn't show the midpoints here. Maybe in another analysis we'll do that, but this was just going to be too long. We do see Moon, Venus, Uranus, and this is a quincunx. You have to remember that vibration 7 is deep inner work. It's introverted, it's turned inside of yourself. This says that this retrograde period, you need to be prepared to work on yourself inside. And the Moon, Venus, Uranus. Well, Moon and Venus together is about this special, tender, sweet place you can share with others inside that feels like a soul connection. A sense of love, of devotion. It's and enjoying the way you can share things from the past with each other. It's lovely. Uranus takes it and says you're going to have possibly some sudden attractions, that you're going to get perhaps insights into the way things are working for you. You got some thoughts on this, Starlight?
Yeah, I mean, so the Uranus energy in this chart is kind of making us be really present with ourselves. It's giving us a chance to really like focus in. And I think it might be helpful for some of us to do a little reflection during this time, because 7-5 is also about that inner world of ourselves. And, you know, we're talking globally. We're not talking about just one person, of course. This is for everybody collectively. But, you know, I mean, I think that's a good thing for all of us to do. Where are we going? What direction are we headed? What's going on in our internal world? I think that this is highlighted in this chart right now. So might be a good idea to just give yourself space during this day to reflect a little bit.
Yeah. This is the 7 represents our inner world, which was really good for you to point out there, Starling. But it also represents how we understand our relationship to the outer world. It's like we have these experiences out the world, and then we pull back into ourselves and figure out what's really going on with them. And what are we in relation to this? You know how you go and you chew over something that happened, and, oh, I wish I'd said such and such. Yeah. Well, this is that whole 7 is that whole reflection process on what we're experiencing in the world and inside of ourselves, and trying to make a coherent pattern out of all of that. It's pulled back, it's introverted, it's quiet, it's the place where we really experience the core of ourselves. Okay, so now beyond VA, here's our not VA part of the game, the Sabian symbols. Okay, there are 3 Sabian symbol patterns in the retrograde cycle related to Mercury, or actually related to any planet. You have the retrograde station, which we've just been talking about. That's the point where Mercury says, I can't go any further. I've got to go backwards and straighten things out. That's also the very end of the whole thing, when Mercury leaves the retrograde degrees. So it's exactly the same Sabian symbol pattern when Mercury turns retrograde, and when Mercury in 25 of Libra, and when Mercury actually exits the whole segment of retrograde degrees. Now, then you have the Sabian symbols for the Sun conjunct Mercury, which is in the 16th degree of Libra. And then you have the direct station. This is when Mercury has gone back to the start of the retrograde degrees. It's gone backwards from 25 of Libra back to 10 of Libra. The Sabian symbols, this is just a comment so you know what I'm doing here. The Sabian symbols listed here are the original symbols given in the book, The Sabian Symbols in Astrology by Dr. Mark Edmund Jones. The interpretation of these symbols was developed by myself without reference to any interpretations of Sabian symbols by Dr. Jones or anyone else, and is copyrighted by me. So here's the picture again of Mercury retrograde, just to remind you of the cycle. Now, what we're doing at this point is see this on the right, this 25 of Libra point, on the 27th of September. All right, that's the one we're looking at right now. We're going to be building up to this all the month of September. It's the 7th of September now, so we've got 20 days to build up to this retrograde point. Then this is the rest of the cycle that we will look at the conjunction and the direct point in the next video. Okay, Mercury turns retrograde. Yay!
Yay!
All right. The Sabian symbol story for Mercury turning retrograde. All right. We're going to go through the symbols. I'm going to go through them two ways. I'm going to go through a comparative statement of the most effective way to handle this. And then I'm going to go through a statement of what happens if you don't get it. If you aren't as effective with it, what could happen? So, behavior, learning to balance power and love, using each to temper the other, developing a deeply grounded connection that's open to both the emotional and the spiritual realms. This is our actual behavioral expression here. Now, the sole intent underneath that is, in the Sabian symbols, is to experience with humility the pain of confronting your darkness and shadow aspects. And the spirit lesson to learn is about handling the powerful, more primitive forces that operate within you on an instinctual level and learning how to refine and guide these forces into a more mature expression. All right. You'll see when you see the pictures for the symbols, this will even make more sense. Now, here are the issues. On a behavioral level, you may find yourself reacting inconsistently and unpredictably, pushing others away from you, finding yourself out of control as you fluctuate between power and love. All right, you go back. If you find yourself starting to do that, go back to the regular behavioral expression, meditate on it. There's a clue here. Ground yourself. Make a deeply grounded connection open to both your emotions and the spiritual realm. Now, in the soul level, this is about a tendency to deny or block your personal awareness of your shadow. The shadow is the things inside of us that we deny and we push away from us because we want to say, I'm not that. Because we push this away from it, oftentimes we see it in other people while we're denying it in ourselves. And when we see the things that we are trying to avoid in ourselves, in other people, we can react with fear and anger. The deepest level of this, the spirit lesson that we're working on here, is being caught up in the more primitive, crude, and violent aspects of yourself. And this is, remember, when we don't handle it well. So this is about uncontrolled explosive responses that you justify. And say, oh, that was all right because this person said the wrong thing, and therefore I was justified in really exploding on them and maybe hitting them or whatever. Well, that's out of control. And what we have here is that this is a spirit challenge to recognize these forces, refine and guide them into more mature expression. Even if that means that you feel this energy welling up inside of you and you just turn around and walk away. And walk by yourself until you can get control of it again. There's a challenge here to use this energy, to learn how to handle these very powerful energies within you. Thoughts before I go on to the symbols, Starling?
Yeah, so these symbols that we're looking at are, again, for this time period, for this time period of, right. Okay.
Right around the retrograde. I'm going to give the exact days involved in a minute.
Right. Okay.
Here's a reminder that the retrograde is at September 27th at 1:10 a.m. at 25 of Libra 28. This is the symbol for 26 of Libra. Remember, the Sabian symbol is always part of a degree counts as a whole degree. So we're in 25, therefore we're looking at 26 of Libra. An eagle and a large white dove turning one into the other. Learning to balance, I'm reading over the things combined together. Learning to balance power and love, using each to temper the other, developing a deeply grounded connection that is open to both the emotional and spiritual realms. And you can do both of these. You can do some of both. This is a continuum from you really got it together to you really lose it in this particular Sabian symbol. And you can start to lose it, and then you can pull back, ground yourself, get some control of it. If this is not something that you only do one half or the other, you can fluctuate between them. So the other half is you're reacting inconsistently and unpredictably, pushing others away from you, finding yourself out of control as you fluctuate between power and love. So you want to exert your power, but then love says, hey, wait a minute, we care about these people. So that comes in a little bit. Then the personal need to exert, you bounce back and forth between them.
Yeah, the perfect image of an eagle and a white dove turning into each other. I mean, that description. Yeah, I love it. That's great.
And this is going to be going on for almost 5 days.
Actually,
yeah, over 5 days. For 5 days and about 20 hours. Almost 6 days that we're going to be we're going to be in 25 of Libra dealing with this energy. This is the behavioral expression. So this is a time to really be on guard. See, notice we saw this issue connected with stability or problems with the expression of your energy assertively. We saw it in the chart. But what the Sabian symbols do is they give us a more clear expression of it. But I think it's really interesting that the chart pattern for this retrograde period looked like it related to what we're seeing in the Sabian symbols.
Right. It sure does. It's like they go hand in hand, even though they're different forms of thought.
Right. Now we're going to look at the soul level, which is the 13th vibration, and the spirit level, which is 169th vibration. And those are smaller time periods. It concentrates more and more in on the actual time when the retrograde occurs. Okay, so the second symbol is a large white cross upraised. This is, look at the bottom, you'll see this is between September 26th at 1:55 p.m., September 27th at 12:18 p.m., almost 24 hours with the time of the retrograde right in the middle of it. So this is about the pain of confronting your darkness and shadow. There's your cross. To experience with humility the pain of confronting your darkness and shadow aspects. To accept the issues inside of yourself. or to deny and block your personal awareness of this shadow, which, as we talked about earlier, results in you putting it out there on somebody else and thinking they're doing it because you're not facing it inside of yourself. And then you react with fear and anger to what they do, which is really what you're doing inside. Okay, now the most concentrated part is the spirit part that is like 2 hours on either side of the exact retrograde time. And this spirit part has a Sabian symbol and orangutan. This is about experiencing the powerful, more primitive forces operating within you on an instinctual level, and recognizing the need to refine and guide those forces into more mature expression. If you don't grab a hold of them and work with them, you're likely to experience, either from you or from somebody else, uncontrolled explosive responses. At least you're going to know what's going on. If you or somebody else around you gets caught up in these more primitive, crude, and violent aspects of yourself, it can bring this uncontrolled explosive response and a tendency afterwards to say, as I explained earlier, oh, it was really your fault that I acted that way because of what you did. The explosive levels here are your responsibility to handle the explosive levels within you. It doesn't matter what somebody does. This level of uncontrolled explosion is not justified. So that's what we're looking at today, Starlene.
Awesome. Well, this was really great. Thank you so much for sharing everything and all the work that you did with the Sabian symbols. I wanted to also let everybody know that we will be putting out a part 2 to this, where we talk about the actual retrograde and then go forward to the rest of it. The actual, not just the retrograde, but the Sun conjunct Mercury in the middle of the retrograde. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And of course, as always, thank you, Linda, for being my partner in this. It's always a pleasure to do work with you.
Well, thank you for all you do and for the insights you have into this, Starlene. I couldn't do this without you.
Much love. We'll see you guys later. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.